Good morning. It's June 9th, 2022. Thought I'd do a little walk through the garden, update on a few things. It's been really dry here, but we recently had a couple days of good rain, which has been welcomed. And so I did a little bit of scything around here to mulch some of my plants with. The grass was starting to get pretty tall. A couple things to note here. We've got used to be an apricot tree, and the grafted part died and it was grafted onto a peach rootstock. And so this year is the first year it's growing a bunch of fruit. So I'll probably have to go in and thin some of this out. But it's got quite a few peaches on it. It had pink flowers a little while ago. There's a hazelnut bush growing underneath that some rodent must have planted. So it's exciting to see what kind of fruit this thing has, if it's any good. Don't know. Some of the fruit already has quite a bit of damage from bugs. So I'll be picking some of that off, but maybe we'll get a few edible peaches off here. We'll see. Turning over here, this is the first year I'm seeing fruit on this Carmine Gumi, which is an exciting cultivar that has larger fruit than the other cultivars that I'm aware of. And you can't see it very well, and it's not turning red yet, but these are probably 1.5 times the size of the normal Gumi fruits that I've seen. So that's exciting. Over here, service berries are having a decent crop this year, although it was so dry that I thought it wouldn't amount to much. There's quite a bit of fruit on the trees. The birds are already visiting and getting some of it. Probably the ones that are bug damaged turn red sooner. If you can see this one here. But in the next few weeks, probably a couple of weeks, those should be turning ripe, and that'll be a bird feeding frenzy. So we'll kind of just meander through here. There's not too much to note around here. This quince tree has its first fruit this year. That's exciting. I don't know how that'll be. They're supposed to be larger than the little ornamental quince fruits. And you can't smell it, but I wish you could. Right now, these Amorpha fruticosa, the false indigo bushes, I've got dozens and dozens of these around the garden, and they are flowering, and it smells so amazing. It's like a very dark, spicy, kind of mysterious scent, but very, very nice. And the bees are going crazy for them. Excuse me. This is another Gumi bush. This is I don't know if this is a red gem or sweet scarlet. I have to read the tag, but anyway, this is the sort of like the more typical size of the fruit on these. Leaves look a little bit yellow. I'm not sure why. It's a nitrogen fixing plant, so you'd think that it wouldn't be deficient, but who knows. So this is all stuff that's been replanted in the last couple of years. Seeded a lot of wildflower mixture into here, so that's what all these yellow coreopsis are. You'll see a lot of monarda and some other stuff sprouting back up in this area. And you can see again, I've mown with the scythe, which has helped make the paths a little bit more clear, and also give me some needed mulch for things like these pawpaw trees here and here. Those things really struggle in the drought. There's a service berry there that's got a lot of fruit on it. Golden Alexanders are flowering here now, and then those brighter yellow ones back there and here, those are lance leaf coreopsis, and those are kind of just starting to really come into their own. They're pretty prolific around here. They're also called sand coreopsis, which might explain why they do well here. But I'd say only about half or a third of those flowers are actually open right now. There'll be a lot more in the next week or so. So as we get up here, this area never has felt as full as it should. Some things I planted have not made it, so I've planted a couple new things in here just to fill it out. I've got a new autumn olive. There's a red bud back there. Forest ag hazelnut here. Some cup plants, some raspberries. Birds are making some nice songs today. Another hazelnut here, where a dwarf apple tree died years ago. So this big tree here, or medium tree, is a little leaf linden, and it's about to flower. The flower bracts are forming and there's little flower pod things coming out. This is a pear, Harrow Sweet pear, and it used to be about this tall maybe 5 years ago, and I had to cut the whole top of it off because of fire blight, but it's got a lot of fruit on it this year, and I may have to actually come thin these off because it's probably too many. I don't want to snap the branches off, but looking decent. So panning up, more false indigo. This tall thing here is a chestnut that's got a peculiar, very straight, narrow crotch angle kind of growth habit, almost too narrow, not great. And that's actually died down to the ground a couple different years, so we'll see if that makes it over the long term. Hedgerow here is looking good, filling out. 9-barks just finished flowering. That's what those kind of reddish things are there. Those are what come after the flowers. This area is filling out pretty decently, although a lot of the stuff that used to be here is gone. We've got rosin weed here, this kind of clump. There's daylilies, hazelnuts that the rodents have planted. Almost dead peach tree that's actually making a few peaches this year. It's trying, you know. This poor thing's got sap oozing out of it everywhere. The bugs have just hammered this thing over the years. I'm amazed that it's lasted this long. But there's another little peach tree down there that I grew to replace it. So I don't want to pan around too much because I've noticed that in these videos when I move the camera too fast it really is disorienting, so I'll try not to do too much of that. My shed and little nursery area here, kind of a mess as usual. This persimmon tree, this is a male persimmon tree that grew through a pot. It's about to flower pretty soon. I've got a couple, there's a new bench that I made this year out of scrap. A couple of these air pruning raised grow beds. A lot of the stuff is not emerged yet, so here I kind of was late in planting some chestnuts. On this side, they'll come out soon. These are chestnuts I planted earlier. They're doing okay. There's some grape cuttings there. There's some persimmon seedlings there. Hazelnuts and Nanking cherries over there. These are all persimmon seeds that from fruit that I was able to gather from Oikos last year, so I'm really excited to have persimmons again for giving away and trade or whatever. Hedgerow looks good, no complaints there. Some pecan trees. Here's another new grow bed that I built this year, and this one's doing pretty well. We've got some willows, a few different kinds of elderberries, Nanking cherries, clove currants, hickory trees, some other stuff. So I will come through here. I'm not going to walk through the whole property today because it's too long, and the back third or half of it's not that exciting anyway. Not much to see. This is my work in progress former vegetable garden beds that I'm reclaiming as perennial beds. This elderberry, I think it's called Hoshberg, just about to flower. Little flowers are forming on there. That's cool. Here we've got some currants and gooseberries and Nanking cherries, hazelnuts, honeyberries, all kinds of stuff that I've planted. Ahead of me again, you can see more 9-bark with the reddish tufts, and then these purple spikes, that's more false indigo. Just over there you can see I did a bunch of grafting this spring, apples and pears, mostly wild stuff that had been planted by birds and animals. But this area is kind of filling out nicely. I like the way it's starting to feel. There used to be a tall tree right here that got cut down by the power company, and so that has you know, the bird perch there and also the fertility of that dropped tree are bringing a lot of life forth. More landscape coreopsis over here, more regenerating forest over here. It's quite a dense mixture of stuff. I'm just kind of picking and choosing what I want to keep. There's a lot of wild service berries over here that the birds have planted, and you'll see on some of these service berries it's been a very bad year for cedar apple rust. You can see here this one is pretty much just hammered with it. And you know, we've got cedar trees growing all through here, and actually it looks like on this tree up here, I can show you what cedar apple rust looks like on the cedar tree because it's wet. And so these crazy alien looking things, this one looks weirder than normal even, but this is the fungus on the cedar tree, and yeah, they're pretty wild looking. I'll show you another one over here, but this is a real test case for cedar apple rust because we do have, it's disgusting. We do have cedars growing right alongside all these things in the apple family, like service berries, apples, roses, etc. So actually these wild service berries that the birds have planted, I don't know if those are a different species than the ones I've planted. The ones I've planted don't seem to have the rust as badly. So here's one right in front of us. This was planted in 2010. It's got a little bit of the rust. Let me shake some water off this. So you can see it's got some, but it's not nearly as bad. Some of those little ones are just covered. I'm not sure if that's because it's a larger tree that's more robust and those other ones are still establishing or what, but anyway, they look pretty bad. Wild goose plum thicket here, among other things, that got tree spaded out, and then once that happened, it initiated tons of suckering and sprouting, and I actually did go in and thin about half of those stems out, but you can't really tell now. So I'll walk over here, more old hedgerow, replanted hedgerow, false indigo. I want to start a little roadside plant stand. Probably going to end up doing it somewhere between the garage and where these poles are. Not really supposed to have buildings in this right of way, but it'll be a building that's not anchored into the ground or anything. But the front part of my forest garden over here doesn't really have a good space for it. I don't want to be too close to the road. So that's a project that I'm working on or thinking about right now. More beautiful false indigo, dying old peach tree there. This is the wild goose plum that got spaded out from just about 50 feet away. And it had tons of flowers this year, but no fruit. Probably does not have a pollinator. I don't know if the native plums catch that in terms of pollen, but maybe next year, we'll see. A little box elder seedling here. I just noticed that's got a bunch of those winged maple helicopter things on it for the first year. Now let me pan over here. We're gonna walk through, but over here, this is my chestnut coppice area. Mostly a failure, I would say. Chestnuts have been there for 5-6 years, some of them, and none of them are more than waist tall, which is amazing. Honey locusts, which I did not plant, are just growing here. They're doing okay. And the 2 autumn olives that I planted, I've pruned those pretty hard, but they're growing quite well. So it just shows you, certain things, a few things will grow really well here, like autumn olive, but a lot of things don't want to grow well here. And speaking of things with having a hard time, this poor hickory tree, I had to put these ugly guards on it because the deer would just not let this thing, this has been here for 10, 11 years, and it's only about as tall as my waist because the deer would never let these sprouts grow on the top. They just kept eating them and eating them. So this is a crude solution, but trying to get some new growth protected. They must really love this particular plant because I've got other hickories and pecans nearby that do not get eaten like this. And the foliage does smell nice. I mean, it's a nice kind of citrusy smell to it, so I don't blame them, but man, give it a break. Okay, now walk quickly through here. Some sea berries, sea buckthorn here, not doing that great. Did find some incidental King Stropharia wine cap mushrooms growing in some wood chip mulch that I put here. That was a nice surprise. I've grown that on purpose before by inoculating wood chips, but in this case it just came in on some wood chips that I had dumped. This is a wildflower garden. If you've ever watched my videos before, you've seen this. It's holding its own pretty well. The big thing there is rosin weed. The big leafed thing over there is prairie dock. And we've got, I think, tall coreopsis. There's some monarda, some other cool stuff. There's compass plant with these incised leaves next to the goldenrod. Another 9 bark. Got black locust, which flowered about a week or 2 ago. That was beautiful. This overstory back here is black locust that will be thinned out as needed. It's sprouting up everywhere. Just going to continue on over here. That's a pear tree, wild pear that I grafted last year. Doing okay, it's growing. Probably should give it some protection. My chestnuts, I've got lots of chestnuts around here, and some of them are flowering for the first time this year. There's my big, beautiful, tall chestnut there. It's got the beginnings of flowers on it. And I've got several other small to medium-sized chestnuts here that are also putting out the fronds or whatever that will become flowers. I'll show you here in a second. This is a chinkapin chestnut, but all these things are the things that will be flowers soon. So just keep walking through. Straight ahead of us here, there's a tall cherry tree, and then there's some tall winged sumac here. And I planted a pecan tree kind of in a too much of a shady spot, and other stuff has grown up in the meantime. And the pecan's grown kind of slowly. So I did some almost hedge laying here. I chopped a bunch of the stuff down. South is this way. So to get more light into this pecan tree here, I chopped this stuff down over here, the sumac, and I think it's going to help. And you'll see how comically large the leaves are on this pecan. None of my other pecans have leaves. I mean, that thing's like 2 feet long, but it's bent way over on an angle. I've probably got to stake it up and straighten it out, give it a better chance. And I also have to cut some of this cherry above it down. Probably cut, at least half of that tree down maybe this winter to open up more light and space. Got some pawpaw trees over here with the catalpa's the taller tree. There's a few other smallish pawpaws there. Apple tree here, grafted this one a few years ago. Actually, all this stuff up here is my graft. I don't remember if this has any fruit from my graft on it this year, but it has. You can see that the rootstock has lots of fruit, little small crab apples that are not very good. So I'm probably going to eventually cut this larger main trunk out and just let it focus the energy on my graft. Again, you've got cedar growing right next to it, so tough spot for an apple. Coming over here, Multiflora Rose, which is kind of an invasive rose, flowering right now. Smells okay. Here is an apple that I grafted last year. This is actually one that had been planted in my yard by birds, so I dug it up and moved it over here. But maybe you can see there's the whip and tongue graft there that's kind of calloused over. I don't remember what variety this is, but I'm sure I've got a note of it somewhere. But I had to put this second cage thing on to protect it from, deer browsing it down. And then as there's some nasty cedar apple rust up there. It looks almost like Christmas ornaments on a tree. That thing is just full of them. Yuck. And they look disgusting right now. They're kind of at their end of life cycle, and they just look so gross. Looks like vomit. Here was an Asian pear tree that I planted probably 10, 11 years ago. It died. The rootstock survived. Weird rootstock. It's kind of woolly, fuzzy growth on it. But this was getting to be a pretty large tree, so I chopped this back, and my friend Matt and I grafted. I think we did some bark inlay grafting here. I think that's what these were, to Ayers pear. So we'll see if those take off. I mean, they're starting to grow. I'll cut more of this rootstock back and let that become an Ayers pear instead of whatever the rootstock is. So I'm not going to go all the way into the back 40 here today. More 9-bark, catalpa. Catalpas are pretty, should plant more of those. They grow pretty well here. This Chestnut Coppice area also pretty much a joke. Nothing really happening there. Wild plums back here. I don't know if, I didn't check the main thicket of wild plums, but I transplanted one a couple years ago with the tree spade, and it's got a bunch of fruit on it this year for the first time, so that's exciting. Or, well, the first time since being moved. You can see everything's leaning over because we had rain or heavy dew last night, so that's why all these things look cockeyed, because they're heavy with the water. So I don't usually walk down this little path here, but I will go down here today as we wrap it up and show you a few things. These tulip trees, tulip poplar, I planted these probably 10, 11 years ago. They look like they're gonna have flowers, I think. These weird little bract things, I think maybe that becomes part of the flower. I don't know how they work exactly. Catalpa tree that I planted, tulip tree again. Some of these have a couple trunks, 2 or 3 trunks, because they've had deer rubs and other issues. think this one had a pretty good deer rub that it's recovering from. You can see that, yeah. But you know, trees are pretty tough. Again, more false indigo to the south side of most of the things I planted back here. We've got, I think, 3 or 4 Seguin chestnuts. They've got proto-flower things on them. Here's another apple tree that I grafted last year to a red, I think it's called Red Geneva or something. I got that scion from my friend John Edgerton. Again, you can see the rootstock has got some cedar apple rust issue going on. And the graft is here. Actually, I used that grafting tool for this one. You can see the little keyhole type shape of that. But that's growing okay. Probably should mulch it some more. Got some pecans through here, more chestnuts. That's a beautiful wild oak that I did not plant, but I'm leaving it for now because it's a very nice looking tree. Once it starts shedding my other stuff out too badly, then I'll cut it down and maybe let it regrow as a coppice. My nice big chestnut again here. Autumn olives, you can see the silvery undersides of those leaves as they flop over. Got some aronia bushes here. They've never done that well because it's not wet enough and the deer just browse them too much. Another chestnut that could use some more love. That's grown from a cultivar seed, so one of the better ones around here. I should mulch it more. Got black walnut in the overstory here. This was just here, this tree. Animal planted that, growing pretty nicely. And these older mulberry trees over here are kind of dying off. They're looking pretty sad and don't make much fruit anymore. But there are some younger, probably the progeny of these trees up here, and they've got a good fruit set on them this year. So I will show you some of that. And we've got wild grape growing over the top of this autumn olive. And actually these wild grapes look like they're going to have fruit this year for the first time, which is exciting because I've never seen fruit in these things, and they've been here for a long time. So yeah, we've got mulberry and grape together. You can see there's some mulberry fruitlets forming. Autumn olive, got cup plant, some more chestnuts. But yeah, some of these younger mulberry trees that are probably 10 years old or less, they've got a pretty good amount of fruit on them this year, so that's exciting. As long as it doesn't get too dry, should be okay. Have not grafted my mulberries yet. I meant to do that probably a month ago, but here we are in June. Yeah, nice fruit on these. Found a nice box turtle back here the other day, a new one that I've never seen before, which is I think at least the 10th individual I've seen around here, so that's exciting. Got some Cornelian cherries hiding back here. I don't think those are fruiting yet this year, although they did flower this year pretty well. The one of them is pretty small. There's one, and there's one back over there. So that's probably about going to wrap this little walk up. Show you a few things that are growing. Not really any fruit to harvest yet, but soon we'll have maybe some Nanking cherries and some service berries. And the cane fruit is coming sooner or later. Those just finished flowering, so probably in a month or so we'll start getting that. Yeah, there's a grafted chestnut from Dick Winkle. I think that's his cultivar. So that's got flowers on it this year. If it starts to fruit, I might actually pull those fruit off because I think it's better to let the tree use its energy to grow bigger rather than fruit. But yeah, I wish you could be here to smell these false indigos. They smell so good. We're not seeing much bee activity because it's very wet outside and a little breezy and cloudy, but later in the day these things are just covered, and they're really regal looking flowers, purple with flecks of gold. Really cool stuff. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.